What if everything you've been told about procrastination is completely wrong? Not slightly wrong, not a little off, completely, fundamentally, dangerously wrong. You've been told you're lazy. You've been told you lack discipline. You've been told that if you just wanted it badly enough, you get off the couch and do the work. And every time you've failed to follow through, every missed deadline, every broken promise to yourself, every night you went to bed thinking, tomorrow will be different. You believe that story a little more. But here's what nobody told you. Procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. It's a neurological glitch, a software bug running in background of a brain that was built for a world that no longer exists. And once you understand exactly how that bug works, once you see the wiring behind it, you can rewrite the code permanently. By the time you finish reading this, you won't just feel motivated. You'll understand your own brain at a level most people never reach. You'll have a system, not a pep talk, not a motivational quote, a real science-backed system for rewiring your neural pathways, so that taking action becomes as natural and automatic as breathing. This is not self-help fluff. This is brain science. And it's about to change everything. Chapter 1. Your brain wasn't built for this. Let's start with something that might feel a little uncomfortable. Your brain is ancient. Not ancient like your grandparents' house, ancient like 200,000 years old, ancient. The hardware running your daily life, the decision-making software, the emotional reactions, the sudden urge to check your phone instead of finishing that report, was designed for a world where the biggest problem of the day was finding food before something bigger found you first. Think about that for a second. Your brain's operating system was written when survival was the only goal on the to-do list. There were no 5-year plans, no quarterly reviews, no creative projects with fuzzy deadlines. There was only, is this safe right now? Is there food? Is something going to eat me? Fast forward to today. You're sitting at your desk. You have a presentation due Thursday. You know it's important. You know exactly what you need to do. And yet, there you are, scrolling through videos of dogs doing funny things, feeling vaguely guilty, telling yourself you'll start in 10 minutes. That 10 minutes becomes an hour. The hour becomes a day. And the quiet, creeping shame begins to build in your chest like a slow leak in a tire. Here's what's actually happening inside your skull during that moment. The moment you think about starting something that feels difficult, uncertain, or requires sustained effort, a part of your brain called the limbic system, your ancient emotional survival-first brain, sends up a red flag. Danger, unknown territory, possible threat. And your brain, being the deeply efficient energy conservation machine that it is, starts looking for the nearest exit. That exit is usually your phone, or the kitchen, or suddenly deciding that now is the perfect time to reorganize your sock drawer. Neuroscientists have actually measured this. When you think about starting a task you've been avoiding, 2 brain regions light up: the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, the same areas that activate when you stub your toe or burn your hand on a stove. Your brain treats the thought of difficult work as a form of physical pain. You're not being dramatic. You're not weak. Your brain is literally registering discomfort. And then here's the part that makes this whole thing a cycle. The moment you give in and avoid the task, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. The relief of avoidance feels good. Your brain logs that as a win. Avoided the scary thing, felt better. Do that again. Over time, this becomes a loop, a groove in the road. And every time you drive that same route, the groove gets deeper and the path gets more automatic. Dr. Timothy Feichel's decades of research at Carleton University shows that people who struggle most with procrastination tend to have what you might call an imbalance of power between two brain systems. The limbic system, emotional, impulsive, immediate, is running the show, while the prefrontal cortex, the planning, reasoning, long-term thinking part, is barely getting a word in. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to drive somewhere important, but the GPS keeps getting overridden by a backseat driver who panics every time you approach anything unfamiliar and screams, "Turn back! Go home! This isn't safe!" That's your limbic system, and without training, it wins every time. But here's the part that changes everything. Your brain can be rewired. This isn't metaphorical. This is biology. Your brain has a property called neuroplasticity, the ability to physically restructure itself based on repeated experiences. Every thought you think, every action you take, every choice you make is literally sculpting your neural architecture. The pathways you use most often become faster, stronger, more automatic. The pathways you stop using fade like old roads growing over with grass. This means that procrastination isn't your destiny, it's your current default setting, and defaults can be changed. There's a biological process called myelination, where the fatty sheath around frequently used neural pathways thickens over time, making electrical signals travel faster and more efficiently. The more you practice action over avoidance, the more your brain literally optimizes itself for action. Your brain also falls into a trap called temporal discounting, the tendency to value immediate rewards far more heavily than future ones. A marshmallow right now beats 2 marshmallows later, even when you know the math doesn't add up. Research building on Dr. Walter Mischel's famous work on delayed gratification shows something profound. The ability to wait is trainable, and people who develop that ability don't just succeed more. Their brains actually look different. Their prefrontal cortexes are more developed. Their limbic systems are less dominant. You weren't born with a fixed procrastination level any more than you were born with a fixed level of fitness. The question isn't whether your brain can change. The question is whether you're willing to use the right training program. This entire guide is that training program. But before you can rewire something, you need to understand what you're working with. And that starts with understanding something most productivity advice completely ignores. Not all procrastination is the same. Chapter 2. What kind of procrastinator are you? Here's where most advice goes wrong. Every productivity blog, every time management course, every just do it speech treats procrastination like it's one thing, one problem with one solution. Take cold showers, make a to-do list, set a timer, drink more water. But procrastination isn't one thing. It's 4 things. And using the wrong solution for your type isn't just ineffective. It can actually make things worse. After years of brain imaging research and thousands of case studies, researchers have identified 4 distinct neurological profiles behind chronic procrastination. Understanding which one you are is the single most important diagnostic step in this entire process. Type 1. The perfectionist. You don't procrastinate because you don't care. You procrastinate because you care too much. The perfectionist procrastinator's brain has an overactive anterior cingulate cortex, the region responsible for detecting errors and inconsistencies. It's essentially a very sensitive alarm system. And for perfectionists, that alarm is set about 10 times too sensitive. The moment you consider starting something, your brain immediately floods with every possible way it could go wrong, every flaw, every potential criticism, every gap between where the work might land and where you feel it should be. So instead of starting, you prepare, you research, you organize, you plan, because planning feels like progress while somehow keeping you safely away from the terror of actual execution and the possibility that when you finally try, it might not be perfect. If you're a perfectionist procrastinator, you've probably been praised your whole life for the quality of your work. But you've also left a trail of unfinished projects, abandoned ideas, and unrealized potential behind you. Not because you lack talent, but because your brain's standard was set impossibly high from the start. The solution for perfectionists isn't just lower your standards, it's learning to separate the act of starting from the act of finishing, so your brain stops treating every blank page like a performance review. Type 2. The dreamer. You have more ideas than most people will have in a lifetime. You can see the vision, so clearly, the finished product, the outcome, the transformation, that the actual step-by-step path feels almost beneath the beauty of the dream. The dreamer procrastinator has a hyperactive default mode network. The brain regions that light up during imagination, future thinking, and creative visualization. It's a gift, genuinely, but it comes with a blind spot. Brain scans of dreamer procrastinators show almost no activation in the regions responsible for sequential planning and step-by-step execution. The bridge between vision and action is underdeveloped. And because imagining the outcome triggers almost the same dopamine response as actually achieving it, the dreamer's brain can trick itself into feeling like the work is basically done, while nothing has actually been built. If you're a dreamer, you've probably started more things than you've finished. You have notebooks full of brilliant ideas. You get excited easily and deflate just as fast once the exciting part ends and the actual grinding begins. The solution isn't to stop dreaming. It's to build the bridge from dream to action, one small concrete step at a time. Type 3. The worrier. Your brain doesn't just anticipate problems, it manufactures them. The worrier procrastinator has an overactive amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, combined with a nervous system that's been calibrated toward caution. For worriers, uncertainty doesn't feel uncomfortable, it feels dangerous, and almost every new task comes packaged with uncertainty. What if it doesn't work? What if people judge it? What if I do it wrong? What if I do it right and then something changes? What if I succeed and it creates new pressure I can't handle? The worrier doesn't procrastinate out of arrogance or laziness. They procrastinate because their brain is constantly running worst-case scenarios, and the only way to feel temporarily safe is to wait until they're absolutely certain, which, of course, never actually arrives. Worriers often become masters of research, preparation, and seeking reassurance. They're thorough and careful when they finally do act. But the path to action is paved with so much anxiety that they often don't arrive at all. The solution for worriers isn't just be more confident. It's calming the nervous system before engaging the task, learning to act with uncertainty present rather than waiting for it to disappear. Type 4. The crisis junkie. You function best under pressure, You know it. You've always known it. And honestly, you've stopped pretending otherwise. The crisis procrastinator has an under-responsive dopamine system in their baseline state. Normal tasks don't generate enough neurochemical stimulation to feel motivating, but the moment a deadline becomes a crisis, when the pressure is real and the clock is actually ticking, the brain releases a powerful cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline that makes everything click into place. The problem is that your brain has been trained to need that cocktail, and over time, it starts unconsciously manufacturing crises, waiting until the last possible moment, underestimating timelines, avoiding early action, because that's the only state where productivity feels possible. Crisis procrastinators are often brilliant under pressure. Their best work comes out when their back is against the wall. But they pay a chronic tax in stress, damaged relationships, missed opportunities, and the slow erosion of trust with others and with themselves. The solution for crisis procrastinators isn't just start earlier. It's learning to create the right level of neurochemical intensity without requiring actual emergencies. Most people are a blend of types, with one dominant profile that shapes their avoidance patterns most powerfully. Knowing your type isn't about putting yourself in a box. It's about stopping the cycle of trying solutions that were designed for someone else's brain. From here forward, every strategy in this guide will give you the tools to rewire whichever pattern is running your show. Chapter 3. The Brain Hijack. What's happening in the 0.35 seconds before you procrastinate? Here's something that should both disturb and liberate you. You don't consciously decide to procrastinate. It happens before you're aware of it. Advanced neuroimaging research has shown that your brain makes the call to avoid a task approximately 0.35 seconds before you're consciously aware of any resistance, which means that by the time you think, "I'll just check my phone for a second," the decision has already been made. And your conscious mind is just along for the ride, writing the story that justifies it. This is why willpower alone never works. You're trying to fight a decision that's already been made with a tool, rational thought, that arrived late to the scene. So what's actually happening in those 0.35 seconds? It starts with a trigger. This can be anything. Opening your laptop, seeing a specific app, receiving an email, feeling a particular emotion, sitting in a specific chair. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and it has cataloged thousands of environmental and emotional cues. Some of those cues have been paired through repetition with the experience of discomfort or difficulty. The moment your brain detects one of those cues, your amygdala fires a distress signal. This hits your anterior cingulate cortex, which assesses the potential threat. Within milliseconds, activity in your prefrontal cortex, your planning, reasoning, action-initiating brain, is suppressed. You don't feel this happening. You just suddenly feel resistant, heavy, unmotivated, like you'd rather do literally anything else. That's the hijack, and it runs completely on autopilot. But here's what the research also shows. The hijack has 3 points where you can intercept it. Interception. Point 1. Environmental preemption. Before the trigger even fires, you can redesign your environment to remove it. This is the most powerful intervention because it means the hijack never gets to start. You're not fighting resistance. You're eliminating the conditions that create it. When productive tools are visible, easy to access, and positioned naturally in your path, Your brain defaults toward using them, not because you're disciplined, but because your environment is making the decision for you. When distraction is hidden, has extra friction, requires extra steps, your brain's energy conservation system naturally steers away from it. This is sometimes called choice architecture, and it's one of the most underused productivity tools available to you. Interception. Point 2. Pattern interruption. If the environmental cue fires before you've preempted it, you have a narrow window, that 0.35-second gap, to interrupt the neural cascade before it fully locks in. This requires training yourself to recognize the physical sensations of the hijack starting: a slight tightening in the chest, a shift in posture, a sudden craving for distraction. The earlier you catch it, the easier the interruption. Once you notice it, you interrupt the pattern with a specific physical or cognitive action. Not a vague intention, a specific, pre-practiced response. Standing up, taking 3 sharp breaths, counting backward from 5, asking yourself one specific question. The action itself matters less than its consistency. You're essentially short-circuiting the hijack's neural cascade by injecting a different pattern into the sequence. Interception. Point 3. Conscious override. If the hijack has already completed and you're sitting there in full avoidance mode, phone in hand, resistance firmly in place, you can still override it. But you need different tools. The most effective override technique is something called neural bridging, activating a positive emotional or mental state before you try to engage with the avoided task. This might mean playing 3 minutes of music that puts you in a focused state, doing 15 push-ups to shift your physical energy, or taking 60 seconds to vividly visualize yourself in the middle of the work, not struggling to start it, but already deep in it and flowing. The key is that you're not trying to white-knuckle your way through resistance. You're changing the neural conditions so that the task no longer registers as a threat. Your brain hijack also doesn't just trigger at the start of work. It runs what neuroscientists call maintenance protocols, ongoing background checks to see if you should keep going or find an escape. You felt this. You're working, things are going reasonably well, and suddenly, for no apparent reason, you want to stop. That's a maintenance hijack. The solution is the same: pattern interruption, environmental support, and neural bridging, used not just to start, but to sustain. The more consistently you practice these interception techniques, the faster your brain learns that productive work isn't dangerous. And every time you successfully intercept the hijack, you're laying new neural track, rewiring the default toward action, one interrupted procrastination moment at a time. Chapter 4. The 2-minute gateway. Your brain is a catastrophizer, not in a clinical sense, in an evolutionary one. When your ancient brain looks at a big, complex, uncertain task, it doesn't see a project. It sees a predator. It sees something with no clear ending, unpredictable demands, and the real possibility of failure, which in social terms, the brain reads as something close to exile. No wonder you don't want to start. The 2-minute rule, used strategically and understood neurologically, is one of the most effective antidotes to this catastrophizing, and it works precisely because it tricks your brain's threat detection system before the system has time to mount a defense. Here's the neuroscience. Your brain has a region called the anterior cingulate cortex that is constantly running what you might think of as a cognitive load assessment. How much energy is this going to cost? Do we have enough? Is it worth the output? When the answer leans toward too much, procrastination gets the green light. But when you commit, genuinely commit, to doing something for only 2 minutes, this assessment flips. 2 minutes reads as negligible, manageable, safe. The threat register stays quiet, and the prefrontal cortex, your action initiation hub, is allowed to do its job. 2 minutes is enough to cross the threshold. And once you're in motion, something almost magical happens neurologically. The systems that govern starting hand off to the systems that govern continuing, and those are completely different circuits. Starting requires overcoming inertia. Continuing is powered by momentum, a state that reinforces itself, that becomes easier to sustain the longer it runs. The 2-minute rule isn't really about 2 minutes at all. It's about getting you past the starting line. After that, your own brain takes over. There's also a psychological phenomenon at play here called the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's powerful drive to complete things once they've been started. When you begin a task, even briefly, your brain registers it as incomplete, and incomplete things pull at your attention, creating a natural drive to return and finish them. The 2-minute rule is essentially a way to consciously trigger this effect. But let's go deeper. The neuroplastic dimension of the 2-minute rule is its most underrated feature. Every time you use it successfully, every time you start when you didn't feel like it, you're doing something at the cellular level. You're activating neural pathways associated with initiation and follow-through. And with each activation, those pathways get slightly faster, slightly stronger, slightly more automatic. You're not just getting one task done. You're building a person who gets things done. Over time, the identity shift is profound. Your brain begins to construct a self-image based on observed patterns. When it consistently observes you starting things, even when resistance is present, it updates its model of who you are. This is someone who acts. And identity-consistent behavior becomes the path of least resistance. Now, advanced application, different types of cognitive work require different threshold rules. Creative tasks, writing, designing, brainstorming, often need a 5-minute rule because creative thinking requires a longer runway before it reaches full altitude. Analytical work, data, logic, problem solving, can often get moving with a 90-second rule because logical thinking engages more quickly. Physical tasks, exercise, cleaning, building, often need only a 30-second rule because physical momentum builds almost immediately. The rule is also one of the best diagnostic tools you have. If you commit to 2 minutes and still can't bring yourself to start, the resistance you're feeling probably isn't laziness. It's likely emotional. Fear, overwhelm, unresolved feelings about the project. That's important information. It tells you to look at Chapter 8 before you look at your task list. But if 2 minutes gets you started, even reluctantly, even imperfectly, then let the momentum carry you. Set a timer if it helps. Give yourself full permission to stop after 2 minutes. Most of the time, you won't want to. The most sophisticated use of the 2-minute rule comes when you combine it with deliberate dopamine scheduling, ensuring that each small start is followed by a micro reward that reinforces the behavior. This isn't bribery, it's neuroscience. Your brain learns through pattern and consequence. When starting consistently leads to small doses of satisfaction, checking something off, taking a short walk, making a cup of good coffee, your brain begins to associate starting with reward. And eventually, starting becomes the reward. Chapter 5. Engineering your environment for automatic action. You've been fighting the wrong battle. While you've been building willpower, strengthening discipline, and trying to outmuscle your own impulses, your environment has been quietly winning. Every object in your workspace, every notification on your phone, every color on your walls, every sound bleeding through your headphones is sending signals directly to your brain's decision-making systems. And most of those signals are ones you never consciously chose to send. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The environment you're in right now is either programming you for action or programming you for avoidance. There is no neutral setting. Environmental psychology research shows that your brain makes over 35,000 decisions every single day. And roughly 95% of those decisions are unconscious responses to environmental cues. You're not piloting a car. You're mostly a passenger being guided by the landscape outside the window. But once you understand this, you can redesign the landscape. The principle of environmental priming. Your brain operates through a system of associative networks. When you repeatedly experience certain activities in certain environments, your brain builds automatic connections between the environmental cues and the behavioral states. Walk into a gym, and your body starts to prepare for exertion even before you've changed clothes. Walk into a cinema, and your mind shifts toward receptive, relaxed attention. Sit down at a desk that you've only ever used for work, and your prefrontal cortex lights up for productive thinking. The reverse is also true. If you've spent years eating dinner on the couch while watching TV, your couch has become an environmental trigger for passive consumption, not focused creation. And if you've been doing work from your bed while also sleeping, scrolling, and watching Netflix from that same bed, your brain cannot build a clean association between that space and deep focus. It's getting too many mixed signals. The first and most important environmental redesign principle is context specificity, creating clear, dedicated environments for different mental states. This doesn't require a dedicated home office with perfect feng shui. It might be a specific corner of a room, a particular coffee shop chair, or even just a specific set of headphones you only wear when working. The brain responds to ritual and consistency. Give it consistent signals, and it will learn to meet you with the mental state you need. Visual environment design. Your visual system consumes approximately 30% of your brain's total processing energy, which means everything you can see is competing for cognitive resources you need for actual work. Clutter isn't just aesthetically unpleasant, it's neurologically expensive. Each piece of visual noise is a small claim on your attention, creating micro-demands that accumulate into a kind of mental static. Researchers at Princeton University found that physical clutter competes for your attention and significantly reduces your ability to process information and maintain focus. Clean, minimal, organized workspaces reduce cognitive load, not because tidiness is a moral virtue, but because your brain can allocate all of its available processing power toward the task in front of you, instead of continuously scanning and managing a chaotic visual field. Beyond clutter, the colors in your environment affect your neurochemistry in measurable ways. Cool blue tones enhance alertness and analytical thinking. Green environments reduce mental fatigue by activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Warm reds can increase urgency and energy, useful in short bursts, but potentially stress-elevating over long periods. If you can't paint your walls, a desktop background, a plant, or a colored lamp can create meaningful shifts in your brain's ambient state. The proximity principle. Your brain is a lazy optimizer. When faced with two options, it almost always chooses the one that requires less physical and cognitive effort. This isn't a character flaw. It's efficient survival programming. You can weaponize this tendency by manipulating the physical distance between you and your choices. Productive tools, your notebook, your keyboard, your reading material, should be immediately visible, easily accessible, and in your physical path. Distracting tools, your phone, your gaming console, your TV, remote, should be physically distant, inconveniently placed, or hidden entirely. When checking social media requires you to stand up, walk to another room, enter a password, and find the app buried in a folder, your brain's laziness works for you instead of against you. This isn't about eliminating pleasure. It's about engineering the path of least resistance to run through your productive behaviors instead of around them. Acoustic architecture sound shapes brain states in ways that are immediate and largely unconscious. Unpredictable noise, office chatter, street sounds, intermittent interruptions activates your brain's alerting system and prevents deep focus. Your attention keeps being pulled outward, away from the work, toward the source of the sound. White noise or pink noise creates a consistent acoustic environment that masks disruptive variation and helps your brain maintain steady, focused attention. As certain types of instrumental music, particularly compositions between 50 and 80 beats per minute without lyrics, have been shown to enhance cognitive performance by activating mild positive arousal without triggering the language processing centers that interfere with reading and writing. Binaural beats, specific sound frequencies played at slightly different pitches in each ear, can help synchronize brainwave activity to states associated with focused attention or creative thinking. While the research is still developing, many people report meaningful focus improvements when using them consistently. Temperature and lighting. Your brain's optimal operating temperature range is around 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Environments that are too warm trigger the parasympathetic nervous system's energy conservation response. You get sleepy, sluggish, unmotivated. Slightly cool environments keep your alertness elevated and your cognitive performance sharp. Lighting affects your brain's circadian chemistry. Bright, full-spectrum light in the morning triggers cortisol and dopamine production, giving you your biological motivation boost. Dim, warm light in the evening promotes melatonin and signals wind down, which is why bright screens at night disrupt both your sleep quality and your next day motivation. For your productive hours, maximize natural light where possible. Position your workspace near a window. Use a daylight simulating lamp during darker months or evening work sessions. The investment in light quality pays dividends in sustained cognitive energy. Digital environment design. Your phone is the most sophisticated distraction machine ever engineered, designed by teams of behavioral psychologists whose entire job is to make sure you cannot stop looking at it. Every notification is a dopamine micro-trigger. Every red badge is designed to create an unresolved loop in your brain. Every infinitely scrolling feed is engineered to eliminate natural stopping points. You are not weak for struggling against it. You are a human brain competing against algorithms specifically designed to exploit your neurology. The solution isn't willpower, it's redesign. Turn off all non-essential notifications. Move social media apps off your home screen and into a folder on a secondary page. Or better, delete them from your phone entirely and access them only through a browser on your computer. Set your phone to grayscale mode during work hours. The research shows that the colorless interface significantly reduces its emotional pull. Use app timers, focus modes, and website blockers not as punishment, but as environmental architecture that makes the productive choice the automatic one. Scent and the hidden environment. Your olfactory system, your sense of smell, is the only sensory system with a direct neural pathway to both the memory centers and the emotional regulation centers of your brain. Every other sense gets processed through a relay first. Scent goes straight in. This means specific scents can trigger very specific mental states almost immediately. Peppermint and rosemary have both been shown to enhance alertness, memory, and cognitive performance. Lavender reduces cortisol and calms the nervous system. Useful before tasks that require calm precision rather than high energy. Citrus scents increase positive mood and motivation. By consistently pairing a specific scent with focused work sessions, you can create a conditioned response where the scent itself begins to trigger the productive mental state, a form of environmental anchoring that works below the level of conscious thought. The ultimate goal of all of this environmental work is a concept researchers call cognitive ease, the state where the productive choice requires less mental energy than any alternative. When your environment consistently signals focus, reduces friction for action, and removes triggers for avoidance, your brain stops fighting itself. Productivity stops being something you summon through effort and becomes something that simply happens like water flowing downhill. Chapter 6. Hacking your dopamine system for motivation on demand. Let's correct one of the most widespread misconceptions in productivity. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical, it's the anticipation chemical. Dopamine doesn't flood your brain when you experience something good. It surges when your brain predicts that something good is coming. It's the neurochemical engine of motivation, seeking, and forward movement, not satisfaction. Satisfaction is quieter. Satisfaction is the signal that the seeking is done. This distinction matters enormously because it means that if you want to feel motivated, you don't need to wait for something good to happen. You need to make your brain anticipate that something good is about to happen, and that's something you can engineer. The dopamine dysregulation problem. Here's what's happened to most of us. We've accidentally trained our brains to expect massive dopamine spikes from activities that require almost no effort. Scrolling social media delivers an unpredictable stream of novel stimuli, likes, comments, surprising videos, mini dramas that triggers constant low-grade dopamine release. The unpredictability is crucial. Variable rewards are more dopaminergically stimulating than predictable ones, which is why slot machines are more addictive than a guaranteed $10 bill. After enough exposure to this kind of stimulation, your brain's dopamine system recalibrates its baseline. Normal, productive activities, writing a paragraph, analyzing data, having a thoughtful conversation, stop feeling rewarding because they can't compete with the artificial spike that your phone delivers every 30 seconds. This isn't a discipline failure. This is dopamine dysregulation, a neurochemical imbalance created by a modern environment that was never designed with your brain's long-term functioning in mind. The path back isn't deprivation. It's strategic recalibration. The dopamine reset. The most powerful starting point for anyone whose motivation feels chronically flat is a temporary reduction in high-stimulation activities. This doesn't have to be a dramatic all-or-nothing detox, but it does require intentionality. For a period of 2 to 4 weeks, deliberately reduce your exposure to the activities that deliver the biggest, easiest dopamine hits. Mindless social media scrolling, binge-watching, video games played for hours without clear stopping points, impulsive online shopping. Not because these things are morally wrong, but because they're raising the bar so high that your brain can no longer feel the natural rewards of productive work. During this reset period, something that initially feels uncomfortable begins to shift. Your brain, no longer getting its easy hits, starts to notice the smaller rewards it previously ignored. The satisfaction of finishing a chapter, the mild pride of checking something off your list, the quiet pleasure of focused thinking. Your dopamine receptors regain sensitivity, and the world of productive work starts to feel genuinely rewarding again. Dopamine stacking. Once your baseline is restored, you can begin a practice called dopamine stacking, deliberately pairing activities you naturally find pleasurable with tasks you tend to procrastinate on. Your favorite playlist, the one that genuinely makes you feel alive, only plays during your most avoided work sessions. Your best coffee, the good stuff, the kind you actually look forward to, is reserved for your morning writing or planning block. A favorite podcast or audiobook only runs during your most tedious administrative tasks. The key principle is conditionality. The reward is contingent on the behavior. Over time, your brain begins to associate the avoided task with the pleasurable addition, and the combination becomes something you actually look forward to. Eventually, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting, you begin to associate the pleasant anticipation with the task itself, not just the reward attached to it. The anticipation amplification technique. Your brain's dopamine system responds most powerfully to anticipated reward. This means you can amplify your motivation before you even begin by creating specific rituals that reliably predict a good work session, a specific playlist that you only activate before deep work, a particular way you arrange your desk that signals this is the important work zone, a short breathing exercise or physical warm-up that consistently precedes your best sessions. Over time, these rituals become neurological cues, and your brain begins releasing motivational dopamine in response to the ritual itself. Before the work has even started, you've essentially built your own pre-game routine. Athletes understand this intuitively. Your brain doesn't care whether the performance is athletic or cognitive. It responds to ritual, consistency, and reliable prediction the same way. Micro rewards and progress visibility. Your dopamine system doesn't just respond to final achievement. It responds powerfully to perceived progress, to the feeling that you're moving forward, that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is closing. This is why visual progress indicators are so neurologically potent. A progress bar filling up, a checklist getting ticked off, a streak counter climbing, a before and after comparison of how much you've written. These aren't trivial motivational gimmicks. They're activating genuine dopamine responses by making abstract progress feel concrete, real, and rewarding. Build visible progress into everything you work on. Break large projects into stages that have clear, checkable milestones. Keep a simple done list alongside your to-do list, a record of what you've already accomplished today. Because your brain needs evidence of momentum, not just reminders of what's still left. The novelty injection. Your brain's dopamine system has a love affair with novelty. New experiences, unexpected angles, fresh approaches, all of these trigger elevated dopamine responses because novelty is associated with learning and discovery, both of which the brain values highly. When your productive routines start to feel stale, when the same desk, the same playlist, the same sequence of tasks begins to lose its pull, it's often because habituation has dulled the novelty response. The solution isn't to abandon your systems. It's to inject small doses of novelty into them. Work from a new location once a week. Approach a familiar task from a completely different angle. Try a new organizational method. Learn one new technique and apply it immediately. These small variations keep your brain's curiosity and engagement systems activated without disrupting the core systems that support your productivity. The dopamine action feedback loop. The most transformative dopamine principle of all is this. When you consistently pair dopamine-triggering rewards with productive behavior, your brain begins to crave productivity the way it once craved avoidance. This sounds almost too good to be true, but it's basic conditioning. The same mechanism behind every habit, every addiction, every deeply ingrained pattern of behavior. Your brain learns through repetition and consequence. When productive action consistently leads to positive neurochemical consequences, micro-rewards, visible progress, ritual satisfaction, social acknowledgement, your brain logs productive action as desirable. Procrastination, meanwhile, gets fewer and fewer of the rewards it once reliably delivered. The relief of avoidance is still there temporarily, but it's increasingly followed by the negative consequence of missed opportunity, accumulated stress, and the erosion of self-trust. Over time, the math changes, and your brain, always following the math, begins to choose differently. Chapter 7. The Art of Habit Stacking. Your brain runs on habits the way a city runs on infrastructure, underground, invisible, rarely thought about, but responsible for almost everything that actually works. Once a behavior becomes truly habitual, it moves from the conscious, energy-expensive prefrontal cortex into the automated, energy-efficient basal ganglia, ancient brain structures that handle routine execution without requiring deliberate thought. This is why you can drive a familiar route while carrying on a full conversation, or run through your morning routine while still half asleep. The basal ganglia are doing the work. Your conscious mind is elsewhere. Habit stacking is the practice of leveraging this existing infrastructure to install new productive behaviors, not by fighting the system, but by plugging directly into it. How habit stacking works neurologically. When behaviors are consistently performed in sequence, your brain creates what are called behavioral chains, linked neural pathways where the completion of one behavior automatically primes the initiation of the next. These chains don't require decision-making once established, they just run. Think of a chain of standing dominoes. You tip the first one and the rest fall automatically. Your existing habits are dominoes that are already falling every day. Habit stacking places your new behaviors in the path of that fall. The formula is deceptively simple. After I, existing habit, I will immediately, new behavior. The word immediately carries enormous neurological weight. Temporal proximity is what creates strong neural associations. When two behaviors happen close together in time and space, consistently, your brain begins to link them. The completion of the first becomes an automatic trigger for the start of the second. After I pour my morning coffee, I will immediately open my journal and write 3 sentences. After I sit down at my desk, I will immediately turn off my phone and place it face down. After I finish my lunch, I will immediately review my priority list for the afternoon. These aren't just behavioral strategies. They're neural pathway installations. Every time the sequence runs, the connection between the behaviors strengthens, becoming faster, more automatic, more deeply grooved into the architecture of your daily life. The art of choosing your anchor habits. The existing habit that serves as your trigger, your anchor, is not interchangeable. The best anchors are habits that are highly consistent, have a clear and specific completion point, and share contextual elements with the new behavior you're trying to install. Physiological habits make the most reliable anchors. Waking up, brushing your teeth, making a meal, getting into bed. These happen every day regardless of mood, motivation, or life circumstances, which makes them extremely stable trigger points. Social habits, family dinners, work check-ins, regular phone calls are moderately stable. Personal development habits, exercise, reading, meditation are less stable and are better positioned after a more stable anchor than used as anchors themselves. The more specific your anchor's completion point, the better. After I finish exercising is vaguer and less reliable than after I put my sneakers back in the closet. Specificity creates a clear neural signal that the sequence should proceed. Energy matching. One of the most common habit-stacking failures happens when people try to link behaviors that require very different types of mental energy. Stacking a high-intensity analytical task immediately after a passive, low-energy routine often fails, because your brain has to make too large a cognitive jump. The transition creates friction, and friction is where chains break. Successful habit stacks maintain consistent energy levels through the sequence. A morning physical routine flows naturally into mentally demanding work because both involve elevated arousal. Administrative tasks link naturally to organizational routines because both operate in a similar cognitive mode. Creative work pairs well with mindfulness or journaling because both require open, receptive attention. Design your stacks so each behavior sets up the right mental conditions for the next one. Micro-stacking for gradual expansion. You don't build a habit stack all at once. You build it the way a coral reef builds itself, one small addition at a time, each layer growing naturally from the one before. Start with just 2 linked behaviors. Run that pair consistently for 2 to 3 weeks until it feels automatic. Then add a third behavior to the sequence, then a fourth. Over months, what began as a simple 2-step sequence can evolve into a sophisticated morning or evening routine that executes with almost no conscious effort. This gradual approach works with your brain's preference for incremental adaptation. Large, dramatic behavioral changes trigger the brain's homeostatic resistance, the same force that makes your body shiver when it gets too cold. gradual changes slip under the radar. Context, stacking. The role of environment. Habit chains are context-dependent. They're formed in specific environments, at specific times, and with specific sensory cues. This is why people often struggle to maintain habits when their environment changes. Why the vacation-proof habit is so rare, and why moving to a new home or starting a new job often disrupts even well-established routines. You can protect your habit stacks by making the environmental context as consistent as possible. Dedicate specific physical spaces to specific habit chains. Use the same sensory cues, the same music, the same lighting, the same objects, each time the sequence runs. The more context consistency you build in, the more resilient your chains become to environmental disruption. Emotional state stacking, perhaps the most sophisticated form of habit stacking, involves sequencing behaviors to leverage the emotional and energetic states they produce. Physical exercise consistently produces a post-workout state of elevated confidence, reduced anxiety, and mental clarity. This state is an extraordinary launching pad for cognitively demanding work. Stacking your most challenging intellectual tasks immediately after exercise doesn't just give you a good habit chain. It gives you better brain chemistry for the work itself. Meditation and mindfulness practices produce a state of open, calm attention and reduced mental noise. This state is ideal for creative work, strategic thinking, or any task that requires seeing clearly rather than reacting quickly. Stacking creative work immediately after a brief meditation session is neurologically intelligent. You're not just building habits, you're sequencing mental states. The compound momentum effect, the ultimate expression of habit stacking, is what happens over time when multiple productive chains are running simultaneously across different areas of your life. Your morning routine produces the right mental state for deep work. Your deep work produces results that generate genuine pride and momentum. That momentum carries into your afternoon. Your afternoon planning prepares tomorrow's morning. Each chain feeds into the next. Eventually, something profound shifts. Productivity stops being something you fight for. It becomes your default. The question is no longer how you'll make yourself work. It's simply, what's next? This is the compound momentum effect, and it's what habit stacking, built slowly and intelligently over months, reliably delivers. Chapter 8. Emotions are the real enemy and the real solution. Let's be direct about something that most productivity guides never say out loud. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It's an emotional management problem wearing a time management costume. Every task you avoid, you're not really avoiding the task. You're avoiding the feeling you associate with the task. The anticipatory anxiety of starting something uncertain. The frustration of wrestling with something difficult. The quiet dread of discovering, once you begin, that it might not turn out the way you hoped. The boredom of sustained effort when the initial excitement has worn off. Your emotional brain processes incoming information roughly 6 times faster than your rational brain, which means that by the time your logical mind is evaluating whether a task is important, your emotional brain has already cast its vote. And if that vote is, "This feels bad," the logical mind is fighting upstream. Experiential avoidance, the hidden tax. When you organize your life around avoiding uncomfortable emotions, psychologists call it experiential avoidance. And it's one of the most corrosive patterns a human being can develop. Over time, Experiential avoidance narrows your world. You stop applying for opportunities where rejection is possible. You stop starting projects where failure is imaginable. You stop having conversations where discomfort might arise. And slowly, the boundaries of your life contract, not because the world is closing in, but because you're pulling inward, away from anything that carries emotional risk. Breaking this pattern doesn't require becoming fearless. It requires developing emotional tolerance, the capacity to take action while uncomfortable feelings are present, rather than waiting for them to disappear before you move. That capacity is a skill, and like any skill, it's trainable. The RAIN technique for procrastination. Emotions. One of the most effective evidence-based approaches for working with procrastination-triggering emotions comes from mindfulness-based research and uses the acronym RAIN. R. Recognize. Name the emotion specifically without judgment. Not, I feel bad, but I'm feeling anxious about this presentation, or I'm frustrated because I don't know where to start. Naming an emotion activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala activity, a neurological phenomenon researchers call affect labeling. You literally calm your brain by naming what it's feeling. A. Allow. Permit the emotion to exist without immediately trying to fix, suppress, or escape it. This is the hardest step. Your brain's entire avoidance system is designed to move you away from discomfort as quickly as possible. Allowing discomfort to exist without acting on it is a radical act of neurological retraining. I. Investigate. Get curious about the physical sensation of the emotion. Where do you feel it in your body? Is it tight in your chest, heavy in your shoulders, a restless energy in your legs? Shifting attention to physical sensation brings you into the present moment and activates the part of your brain that observes rather than reacts. N. Non-attachment. Remind yourself, not as a dismissal, but as a genuine perspective shift, that this emotion is a temporary weather pattern, not a permanent climate. You are not your anxiety. You are not your resistance. These are states passing through you, not facts about who you are. Done consistently, RAIN restructures your relationship with uncomfortable emotions. They stop being stop signs and start being information. And once an emotion is just information, you can choose what to do with it, including taking action in spite of it. Cognitive reframing, realistic thinking, not positive thinking. Procrastination is reliably accompanied by catastrophic thinking, the brain's tendency to project worst-case scenarios onto uncertain situations. If I start this and it doesn't go well, everything will fall apart. If I submit this work and it's not good enough, I'll be exposed as a fraud. If I try and fail, that says something permanent and damning about who I am. Cognitive reframing isn't telling yourself these fears are unfounded with forced positivity. It's training yourself to consider the full spectrum of realistic outcomes rather than fixating on the extreme negative. What's the realistic range of outcomes if you start this project today? What's the actual consequence of imperfect work? What would you tell a close friend who was struggling with this same fear? The answers, when you're honest, are almost always more survivable than your amygdala is suggesting. The window of tolerance. Every person has an optimal zone of emotional arousal where clear thinking and effective action are possible. Psychologists call this the window of tolerance. Too little arousal, low energy, disconnection, numbness, and you lack the motivation to engage. too much arousal, anxiety, panic, overwhelm, and your prefrontal cortex goes offline, leaving you reactive rather than responsive. When you're inside your window of tolerance, emotional regulation techniques are relatively accessible. When you're outside it, either too activated or too shut down, you need to address the physiological state first before addressing the behavioral one. This is why timing matters. Trying to use a 2-minute rule when you're in the middle of a full anxiety spiral often fails, not because the tool is wrong, but because you need to come back into your window first. Breathe, move, regulate, and then engage the task. Values-based motivation, the emotional fuel that doesn't run out. Fear is a short-term motivator. Shame is a corrosive one. But values, the things you care about most deeply, the person you're trying to become, the contribution you want to make, provide a quality of motivation that doesn't deplete the way willpower does. When a task feels meaningless or disconnected from anything that matters to you, your brain has a very hard time sustaining engagement. But when you can genuinely connect even a tedious task to something you care about deeply, even a remote connection, your motivation system accesses a different fuel source. Regularly revisiting your core values and explicitly linking your daily work to them isn't self-help theater. It's neurological reorientation. You're reminding your emotional brain why this matters. And the emotional brain, once it understands why, becomes your partner instead of your obstacle. Chapter 9. Momentum, Flow, and the Psychology of Unstoppable Action. There's a moment that every focused person knows. You've been working for a while, long enough that the starting resistance is gone, the distractions have receded, the noise in your head has quieted down. You're not thinking about working anymore. You're just in it. Time moves differently. The work is coming from somewhere that feels larger than your effort. This is flow. And it is not an accident. Flow is your brain operating at a level of efficiency that most people never systematically pursue. It's not magic. It has conditions. And understanding those conditions means you can access flow, not just wait and hope for it to arrive. The neurological basis of momentum. Before you reach flow, you need momentum. And momentum begins at the neural level with a phenomenon called neural priming. When you engage in focused, productive activity, the neural networks involved remain in a partially activated state even after the session ends. This residual activation means that returning to similar work later, even after a break, requires less energy than starting cold. This is why consistent daily work builds easier and easier over time. Not because the work gets simpler, but because your brain is arriving at each session already partially warmed up, already primed by everything that came before. Momentum also works through your brain's pattern recognition systems. When productive action becomes a consistent, observable pattern in your behavior, your brain begins to expect it. The expectation itself creates neurological readiness. Conversely, patterns of procrastination create expectations of continued avoidance, which is why breaking a productive streak, even for a day, can feel disproportionately difficult. You're not just missing one day. You're interrupting a pattern your brain has been learning to rely on. The activation energy threshold. Physics describes activation energy as the initial energy required to start a chemical reaction. Energy that is typically higher than what's needed to sustain the reaction once it's begun. Your brain works the same way. Starting is always the hardest part, not because you're weak or undisciplined, but because initiating new neural activity genuinely requires more cognitive energy than continuing existing activity. The first 5 minutes of any difficult task are neurologically the most demanding. After that, the brain shifts into a sustaining mode that requires significantly less effort. This single insight changes how you approach resistance. When you feel the weight of starting, you're not feeling evidence that the work is too hard or that you're not capable. You're feeling activation energy, a temporary threshold. Cross it, and the experience often transforms almost immediately. Flow, the operating conditions. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's decades of research on flow states identified reliable conditions that most consistently produce flow. Understanding them lets you design for flow rather than stumbling into it by accident. Clear goals with immediate feedback. When you know precisely what you're working toward and you can tell moment to moment whether you're making progress, your brain can allocate full resources to the task without needing to split attention toward evaluation and orientation. Optimal challenge level. Flow occurs at the edge of your current ability, challenging enough to demand full engagement, accessible enough that paralysis doesn't set in. Too easy and your brain disengages into boredom. Too hard and it panics into anxiety. The flow channel is the sweet spot between those two extremes. Finding it often requires breaking large tasks into pieces that sit in that zone. Elimination of distractions. Flow requires sustained, uninterrupted attention. The brain needs time, typically 15 to 25 minutes, to reach the depth of engagement where flow becomes possible. Every interruption resets this clock. Every notification pulls you back to the surface. Protecting blocks of uninterrupted time isn't a luxury. It's the operating condition for your best work. Intrinsic engagement. Flow is dramatically more accessible in activities that you find genuinely interesting, meaningful, or inherently absorbing. This doesn't mean you can only enter flow in work you love, but it does mean that finding the genuinely interesting angle, the personally meaningful dimension, or the aspect of a task that connects to something you care about will always make flow more available. Attention residue and the cost of switching. Researcher Sophie Leroy identified a phenomenon called attention residue. When you switch from one task to another, part of your cognitive attention remains stuck on the previous task, reducing your capacity for full engagement with the new one. This is why multitasking doesn't work, not just as a philosophical claim, but as a neurological fact. Every task switch leaves a residue, and the more task switching you do, the more your cognitive resources are fragmented across competing priorities, leaving less and less available for any single thing. The implication is powerful. Deep momentum is not just about how you start. It's about how you protect what you've started. Creating buffers between different types of work, transition rituals that deliberately close out the previous context before opening the next one, dramatically improves the quality of focus in each new task. The momentum stack. You can design your workflow to maximize momentum transfer between tasks. This means sequencing activities so that the mental state produced by completing one task flows naturally into the mental state required for the next. Start with a task that generates genuine confidence and energy, something you're good at, something that gives you a quick win. Use the pride and momentum from that win to launch into the more demanding, uncertain, or uncomfortable work. Group cognitively similar tasks together to maintain consistent neural activation patterns. Reserve the most creative, complex, or emotionally demanding work for your peak energy periods when your brain has the most resources available. Rebuilding momentum. After it's lost, momentum breaks. Life interrupts. Travel, illness, family crises, emotional upheaval, any of these can shatter even well-established productive rhythms. The key insight is not how to prevent these disruptions. You cannot, but how to recover from them quickly. The rapid reactivation protocol works by identifying the single, smallest possible action that reconnects you to your productive neural patterns. Not catching up, not rebuilding everything at once, just one specific, concrete, achievable action that signals to your brain that the pattern is resuming. Open the document, write one sentence, make one list, sit in your work chair for 5 minutes with your phone in another room. These micro-actions are not trivial. They're neurological re-entry points. And once you're in, momentum rebuilds faster than you expect. Chapter 10. Advanced Neural Programming. Rewiring at the deepest level. Everything you've read so far works at the level of behavior and environment, which is exactly where change should begin. But there's a deeper level of intervention available to you, directly programming the neural networks that generate your thoughts, beliefs, and automatic responses before they've even reached behavior. This is neural programming, and it's where the most permanent identity-level transformation occurs. Visualization as neural training. When you vividly imagine performing an action, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways that would fire during actual performance. This is not metaphorical. Neuroscientists call it functional equivalence, and it's been demonstrated across decades of research in athletic performance, surgical training, musical skill, and cognitive development. This means visualization isn't just motivational window dressing. It's actual neural training. Effective visualization for productivity isn't about imagining vague success. Yourself happy, accomplished, successful. It's about vividly rehearsing the specific process. Seeing yourself sitting down at your desk, feeling the initial resistance, choosing to begin anyway, working through the first challenging section, pushing through a moment of frustration, finding your stride. The more specific and multisensory the rehearsal, the more powerfully it trains the corresponding neural networks. State anchoring. An anchor is any specific stimulus, a physical gesture, a breathing pattern, a particular word or phrase, that has been repeatedly paired with a desired psychological state until it can reliably trigger that state on demand. Athletes use pre-performance anchors constantly, a specific routine, a physical gesture before a serve or a shot, a brief closing of the eyes and breath pattern before a race. These aren't superstitions. They're conditioned neural triggers. You can build your own performance anchors by identifying a peak focus state, a moment when you're working at your absolute best, and immediately pairing a specific physical action with it. Press your thumb and forefinger together, touch a specific spot on your wrist, take 3 breaths in a very specific pattern. Do this consistently enough while in the peak state, and eventually the physical action alone begins to recall the mental state. You've built a neurological shortcut to your best self. Cognitive restructuring at the neural level. Every time you procrastinate, a specific sequence of thoughts has run through your mind. Most of it is invisible. happening faster than language at the level of emotional tone and imagery rather than clear verbal thought. Neural-level cognitive restructuring involves identifying these automatic thought sequences and systematically replacing them with new ones, not through positive affirmations pasted on a mirror, but through deliberate repeated practice in the specific contexts where the old patterns arise. When you notice the thought sequence beginning, this is going to be hard. You practice the response until it's automatic. Hard is where growth is. I've handled hard before. I'll handle it again. When the identity narrative starts, I'm someone who always procrastinates on this type of thing, you practice the reframe. I'm someone who is building a new relationship with this type of work. Repetition, specificity, and emotional engagement during practice determine how quickly the new patterns become neurologically dominant over the old ones. Subconscious programming through consistency. Much of who you are runs beneath the level of conscious awareness. Your beliefs about yourself, your sense of what's possible, your gut reactions to challenge. These are not the products of rational deliberation. They're the accumulated residue of everything you've repeatedly experienced, thought, and felt. This means that consistent action, even before it feels natural, even when it requires conscious effort, is programming your subconscious over time. Every morning you sit down to work before you feel like it. You're sending a signal to your deeper neural systems. This is what we do now. Every time you choose the harder thing and survive it, you're updating your brain's model of who you are and what you're capable of. You are always programming yourself. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or by default. Chapter 11. The 90-day neural rewiring protocol understanding is not transformation. Knowledge without implementation is just sophisticated self-awareness, which, while pleasant, doesn't move the needle on what you actually do each day. The 90-day neural rewiring protocol is the implementation architecture, the specific sequence through which you take everything you've learned and bake it into the functioning of your daily life. Neuroscience research on habit formation and neuroplasticity consistently shows that meaningful structural neural change requires 60 to 90 days of consistent practice. The 66-day figure from researcher Philippa Lally's work at University College London represents the average time for a behavior to become truly automatic. The 90-day frame gives you this window plus a consolidation buffer. Phase 1. Days 1 to 30. Foundation. The primary goal of the first 30 days is disrupting existing procrastination patterns while beginning to establish new neural pathways. Your brain will resist. This is expected. The resistance is not evidence that the approach isn't working. It's evidence that genuine neural change is happening. Week 1. Neural mapping. Spend 1 full week tracking your procrastination episodes without trying to change them. Note the time of day, the emotional state, the environmental cues, and the specific task being avoided. You're building a map of your personal hijack signature, the specific patterns that run your avoidance. This data becomes the blueprint for everything that follows. Week 2. Introduce the 2-minute rule for 3 specifically identified avoidance tasks. Apply it consistently. Same time each day, same context. Focus entirely on the act of starting, not completing. You're training the initiation circuit, nothing more. Week 3. Add environmental optimization. Based on your Week 1 map, Identify the top 3 environmental triggers for your procrastination and modify them. Add positive environmental cues for your priority work. Begin dopamine scheduling, reserving your high dopamine activities for post-work rewards. Week 4. Introduce basic emotional regulation. Daily rain practice, 5 minutes. Begin cognitive reframing of your most frequent procrastination-triggering thoughts. Start noticing the emotional patterns that precede avoidance without trying to eliminate them. Phase 2. Days 31 to 60. Integration. The second month is where you begin combining systems and developing more sophisticated neural networks. Your brain's neuroplasticity is highly active during this period. It's been disrupted enough from old patterns that new ones are being actively sought. Week 5. Advanced habit stacking. Build 2 complete behavioral chains that execute automatically, one morning, one evening. These chains should integrate at least 3 behaviors each and be anchored to stable physiological habits. Week 6. Visualization programming begins. 10 to 15 minutes of specific, process-focused visualization daily. Focus on the experience of beginning and sustaining productive work, not just the outcome of completing it. Week 7. Flow state training. Identify your 2 to 3 most reliable flow triggers and begin designing work blocks that systematically incorporate them. Protect at least one 90-minute uninterrupted block daily. Week 8. State anchoring installation. Identify your peak focus state, create your personal anchor, and begin using it consistently before your most important work sessions. Phase 3. Days 61 to 90. Consolidation. By day 61, if you've been consistent, your new neural pathways are beginning to feel more natural than the old ones. The procrastination patterns haven't disappeared. They've been weakened through disuse and are losing territory to the new pathways that have been repeatedly reinforced. The consolidation phase focuses on making your new systems robust, stress-tested, and increasingly automatic. Weeks 9 and 10. Advanced troubleshooting. Identify the remaining weak points in your neural programming, the specific situations, emotional states, or environmental conditions that still reliably trigger avoidance, and develop targeted interventions for each one. Week 11. Deliberate stress testing. Intentionally expose your new patterns to mild adversity, working in imperfect environments, starting despite low energy, maintaining your habits during minor life disruption. Stress-tested patterns are more resilient patterns. Week 12. Maintenance system installation. Create a simple weekly review protocol that monitors the health of your key neural programs. Identify early warning signs that a pattern is weakening. Build in periodic refresher practices for the techniques most critical to your functioning. By day 90, you should notice something qualitatively different. The effort required to maintain productive behavior has decreased substantially. The question has shifted from "How do I make myself work?" to "What's the most important thing to work on next?" That shift is the neural transformation working. Chapter 12. Handling setbacks without falling apart. You will fall back. Let's be clear about this now, before it happens, so that when it does, you're ready for it instead of ambushed by it. There will be a week where the productive routine crumbles, a period where anxiety wins and avoidance returns. A stretch of days that feels disturbingly like who you used to be. And when that happens, the story you tell yourself in that moment is more important than the setback itself. The wrong story. I've failed. I'm back to square one. I've proven that I can't really change. I never should have expected this to work. This story is not just emotionally destructive. It's neurologically destructive. Shame and self-criticism activate the same brain regions as external threat, flooding your system with cortisol, suppressing your prefrontal cortex, and making it genuinely harder to return to productive action. Shame is not motivation. It's paralysis wearing the mask of self-awareness. The neuroscience of setbacks. Neural pattern reactivation, the return of old procrastination behaviors, follows predictable biological patterns. When cortisol rises due to stress, your brain automatically defaults to familiar behavioral routines because they require less cognitive energy than newly established alternatives. This is homeostasis, your brain's drive to return to what it knows. This is not failure, it's biology. It is entirely expected, and knowing it's expected means you can plan for it rather than being destroyed by it. The critical variable is not whether a setback happens, it's how quickly you respond. The 24-hour rule. When a procrastination pattern reactivates, when you miss your planned work session, break your streak, or spend a day in full avoidance, you have a 24-hour window before negative momentum significantly builds. Within that window, don't try to catch up. Don't try to compensate. Don't make dramatic new commitments designed to make up for what you missed. Just re-engage with the simplest, smallest element of your positive neural programming. Open the document. Make the list. Sit at the right desk for 5 minutes. Signal to your neural systems that the pattern is resuming. That signal is enough. Momentum will rebuild faster than you expect because the neural pathways you've built aren't gone. They've just been temporarily suppressed. And suppressed pathways reactivate much faster than new ones form. Extracting value from setbacks. Every setback carries diagnostic information that, if you use it correctly, actually strengthens your overall system. After a procrastination episode, ask, what were the specific conditions? What emotional state preceded it? What environmental factors were present? Was there a sleep deficit? A physiological stress load? An unresolved emotional situation? This analysis reveals the weak points in your neural architecture, the places where your new programming isn't yet resilient enough to withstand real-world pressure. Each weak point you identify and address makes your system more robust than it was before the setback. Setbacks, handled this way, aren't regression. They're field testing, and field testing, consistently analyzed and applied, produces a stronger system than laboratory conditions alone ever could. Chapter 13. Precision Troubleshooting for Your Unique Brain. You are not the average study participant. You are a specific person with a specific brain in a specific set of life circumstances. And that means the general principles in this guide will require calibration to work optimally for you. Advanced troubleshooting is the practice of applying diagnostic precision to your individual neural system rather than simply following a generic program and hoping it fits. The energy system analysis. Sustained productivity runs on 4 types of energy, and problems in any one of them can disrupt the entire system. Physical energy, the biological foundation. Sleep quality and duration sit at the top of this list. A single night of poor sleep reduces prefrontal cortex functioning by up to 30%, significantly impairing your ability to initiate tasks, regulate impulses, and manage emotional reactions. No productivity system in the world fully compensates for chronic sleep deprivation. Address this first, before anything else. Cognitive energy, your brain's processing capacity. This fluctuates across the day following ultradian rhythms, roughly 90-minute cycles of higher and lower neural activity. Most people have their peak cognitive window in the morning hours, with a secondary peak in the late afternoon. Identifying and protecting your personal peak window for your most demanding work is one of the highest leverage scheduling decisions you can make. Emotional energy, your psychological bandwidth, unresolved emotional conflicts, chronic relationship stress, anxiety that isn't addressed, and accumulated resentment all consume cognitive resources that your brain would otherwise allocate to productive work. Emotional health is not separate from professional performance. It's the substrate it runs on, meaning energy, the fuel of values-aligned work. When what you're spending your time on feels genuinely disconnected from what you care about, a kind of motivational malnutrition sets in. No amount of technique compensates for the absence of a sense of purpose. If your motivation has flatlined at a deep level, it may be worth asking whether the problem is neural programming or whether it's the work itself. Motivation system diagnostics. When motivation consistently fails, the source is usually one of three places. The goal itself isn't actually yours. It was inherited from external expectations, social pressure, or a version of yourself that no longer reflects who you actually are. A goal that doesn't resonate at the emotional level will always be uphill work regardless of your neural programming sophistication. The reward system is misaligned. You're tracking the wrong metrics, measuring the wrong outputs, or failing to make progress visible in a way that your brain registers as genuinely rewarding. Adjust the feedback loop before concluding you lack motivation. The action steps aren't specific enough. Abstract goals create cognitive overwhelm. Your brain cannot initiate action toward vague destinations. If work on the project isn't producing action, break it down until the next step is so concrete and specific that your brain finds it impossible to misunderstand. Open the document. Read the last paragraph I wrote. Write the next sentence. Advanced environmental troubleshooting. When basic environmental optimization isn't producing the expected results, look beyond the obvious variables. Air quality affects cognitive performance significantly. Elevated CO2 levels in poorly ventilated spaces measurably impair decision-making and focus. Open windows. Use air purifiers. Take regular outdoor breaks during which fresh air clears your cognitive environment as well as your physical one. Ergonomics affect both physical discomfort and attention. A chair that creates back pain, a screen at the wrong height, a keyboard position that creates tension. These physical irritants become background noise that constantly draws partial attention away from your work. Resolving them is not self-indulgence, it's cognitive optimization. Social environment is often completely overlooked. The people around you, physically and digitally, influence your neural states through mirror neuron responses, emotional contagion, and implicit social norms. Working in environments where others are also focused and productive activates the same states in you, often without conscious effort. Chapter 14. Scaling your neural systems for peak performance. Once you've established basic neural programming that reliably prevents procrastination, the natural next horizon is scaling, using these same principles to pursue increasingly complex goals. Larger projects and higher levels of performance. Metacognitive neural programming. The most sophisticated level of neural programming isn't running specific programs. It's developing the ability to observe and direct your neural programming process itself, to notice in real time when a program is functioning well or failing, diagnose why, and adjust strategically. This metacognitive layer develops gradually through deliberate self-observation. After each work session, spend 2 minutes reflecting. What supported my focus today and what disrupted it? Which techniques generated the most traction? Where did I lose momentum and what preceded that loss? Over weeks and months, this reflection builds an increasingly detailed and accurate model of your own brain, a personal neural map that makes every future intervention more precise and effective. Project-level neural programming. Day-level productivity is relatively manageable once your basic systems are running. The harder challenge is maintaining momentum, motivation, and clarity across projects that unfold over weeks or months. Long-duration projects require neural systems that operate on a longer time frame. Milestone tracking that makes progress visible when day-to-day movement feels imperceptibly slow. Weekly review protocols that maintain connection to the project's purpose and direction. Pre-planned protocols for the emotional valleys that inevitably occur in the middle of any significant project. When the initial excitement has faded and the completion is still far enough away that it doesn't generate its own urgency. The middle of a long project is where most good intentions die. Neural programming for the middle means anticipating its arrival, understanding its psychology, and having specific tools ready before the valley appears rather than improvising while you're in it. Neural stamina development. Peak cognitive performance for extended periods requires what you might call neural stamina, the brain's ability to sustain high-quality attention and decision-making across long and demanding work sessions. Neural stamina is built gradually through systematic exposure to increasingly longer periods of focused work, combined with disciplined recovery. The brain follows patterns similar to physical fitness, stress, recovery, adaptation. Deep work sessions are the stress. Sleep, breaks, low stimulus downtime are the recovery. The adaptation, increased capacity for sustained focus, follows from the consistent cycling of both. Multi-domain neural integration. The highest level of neural programming involves developing systems that simultaneously optimize multiple areas of life: career, health, relationships, creativity, personal development, rather than treating them as separate, competing domains. When these domains are designed to support each other rather than compete, the synergistic effect is exponential. Physical health practices enhance cognitive performance. Strong relationships provide the emotional security that enables risk-taking. Meaning, rich personal development fuels professional engagement. Rest and recreation restore the cognitive resources that sustained effort depletes. The most accomplished people don't succeed in one domain by sacrificing all others. They design integrated lives where the domains reinforce each other, and their neural programming reflects that integration. Chapter 15. The Complete Transformation. Who you are now. You've reached the end of this guide, but this is not the end of the process. It's the beginning of a life in which you operate from a fundamentally different neural baseline. Let's name what has actually happened, because it deserves to be acknowledged clearly. You now understand that procrastination was never about laziness, weakness, or lack of ambition. It was a neurological default, a pattern your brain learned through repetition, reinforced by biology, and maintained by an environment that was never designed with your deep focus in mind. You didn't choose it, but you can choose what comes next. You understand the specific mechanics of your own avoidance, the hijack sequence, the emotional triggers, the environmental cues, in a way that most people never reach. This understanding alone changes your relationship with resistance. When resistance arises, it no longer means, "I can't do this." It means, "My brain is running its old program. Let me run the new one instead." You have a complete toolkit: environmental design, dopamine management, habit stacking, emotional regulation, the 2-minute gateway, neural programming, and a 90-day protocol for making these tools automatic. Not as isolated techniques, but as an integrated system, a productivity operating system designed specifically for the way your brain actually works. And more than techniques, you've undergone something more fundamental, an identity shift. Your brain has been observing your behavior throughout this process. Every time you chose action over avoidance, every time you interrupted a hijack, every time you brought yourself back after a setback, your brain logged those observations and updated its model of who you are. That model now includes evidence of someone who follows through, someone who starts things when it's uncomfortable, someone who recovers, someone who builds. Identity shifts don't happen in moments of insight. They happen in accumulated moments of action. And you've been accumulating them. Your relationship with discomfort has fundamentally changed. Difficulty is no longer a stop sign. It's a signal that you're in territory where growth is real and available. The most meaningful work of your life has always lived just past the edge of comfort. And you can now step across that edge reliably, not because you've eliminated the discomfort, but because you've developed the neural capacity to move forward while it's present. Your relationship with time has changed. When you stop losing hours to avoidance and recovery from avoidance, time expands in ways that feel almost physical. The goals that once seemed impossibly far away begin to feel navigable, not because they've gotten easier, but because you now have a reliable system for covering the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Your relationship with yourself has changed. Chronic procrastination carries a hidden tax that most people don't fully account for: the accumulated erosion of self-trust. Every broken promise to yourself, every "I'll start tomorrow" that becomes next week, quietly deposits a layer of self-doubt that becomes the lens through which you see your own potential. Clearing that procrastination consistently, imperfectly, persistently reverses that erosion. You begin to trust yourself, and that trust changes everything about what you're willing to attempt. The world genuinely needs people who can think clearly under pressure, who follow through on their commitments, who build real things and bring real contributions forward. Not just people who are productive for personal gain, but people whose neural mastery enables them to contribute something that would not exist without them. You are now capable of being that person more fully than you were when you started. The neural pathways you've built will continue serving you for decades. They'll grow stronger as you use them, more flexible as you challenge them, and more integrated as they weave themselves into the full fabric of your daily life. Procrastination isn't just in your past now. It's being replaced daily by the identity of someone who creates the life they envision through consistent, courageous, brain-smart action. The only question left, and it's the most important one you'll ever answer, is this: what will you build?